Good afternoon. This is Chandra, Easton here, speaking to you about the Festival of the Lord Master R, which is celebrated every year in the Maitreya Theosophy tradition on the 4th of July. It's an annual festival and it celebrates, and we're invited to celebrate the work of the Lord Master R that has been ceaseless down through the centuries on behalf of humanity, and also to get involved with the purification and the healing so that we can lift our own frequency, our own vibration, and move forward into these years and decades with greater light. As I said, I'm Chandra Easton from Living in Light. I'm an esoteric astrologer, esoteric healer, and you're welcome to check out my website. There's lots of meditations, guided visualizations, teachings, or you can contact me if you're interested in some personal one-to-one work. So what I'll be doing in this talk is I'll be talking about the various names that the Lord Count of Saint Germain is known under, the various roles that he holds and the purpose of his work, his very fascinating, interesting historical involvement, the various incarnations that he's had over the centuries, and his role as we move forward into this 21st century. Okay, so let's talk about the Master R is short for the Master Rakosci. The name Master Rakosci comes from the incarnation where he took his fifth initiation in Transylvania. But for short, we call him the Master R. And it's important to realise that of these various names that we have here, each one of the names gives us a clue and an inkling into his work, what it is that he does on behalf of humanity and the earth. He is the guardian of the violet fire and the violet flame. And if you've had anything to do with the work of the Lady Ananditara Shan or Elizabeth Clare Prophet, you would no doubt have heard of the violet fire and the violet flame, because this is a frequency of light that we can use as individuals to cleanse and purify our auras, and in so doing, it's a profound tool that, if used, will assist us in clearing things we could have been carrying around for a long time. He is the crowned king of the seventh ray, and the seventh ray simply meaning the seventh ray of ceremonial, order and magic. Yes, and the seventh ray is the ray closest, the frequency of light is what it is the ray closest to the physical, and so it's got a great deal to do with our physical realities and our physical world and our governments and our society and our civilizations and also our bodies. And I think it was in the 1950s that he was crowned the king, along with his twin soul, the Lady Portia, who was crowned the queen of the seventh ray. The name, the Comte or the Lord Count of Saint Germain, comes from incarnations that he had. When I say one incarnation, the interesting thing about Saint Germain is that he has been heard to say that he was 350 years old, and he had appeared to have successive, or one would say the same incarnation, over several centuries, between the 16th and the 20th century. As I said, Master R came from his final physical incarnation, although, well, that itself is a mystery. Who's to say that he's not in a body again? Because he's a master of the seventh ray and connected very closely to our world. He is the king of the new age, and I would say also the king of the age of the heart. A lot of his work is to do with the transformation and the transmutation of heavy matter into lighter matter. This is what the alchemists do, the transmutation of lead into gold. Of course, this is a vast subject, absolutely vast subject, and looking at what we're looking at here is the Philosopher's Stone. So the teaching on alchemy really goes all the way back to Thoth Hermes, back to Atlantis, back to ancient Egypt, and the teachings of the transformation of heavy or dense matter into a higher vibration frequency of light. That's the lead into gold. It's the code or the teaching to find immortality. And the Lord Master, the Count of Saint Germain, is definitely found that code and used it, and one would say that is why he has lived concurrently for several centuries in the same body. He is the new Maha Chohan because he has an overseeing role, a guardianship, a caretakership of the other holy ones, the fifth and the sixth level Chohans, the holy ones who are, I was going to say newer holy ones, that's not possible really, but he has a role of guardianship, and he is the Lord of civilization. Here's another image of the Lord Master Ra, and he's got a great deal to do with Europe, and also known as being the regent of Europe. So when we think about the transformational energies that are going on in Europe, you know, think about the European Union, think about the fracturing of Europe, think about the issues with immigration, think about the current war. The Master Ra is deeply involved in all these matters to try and help us move forward so we don't repeat the same old mistakes. In his incarnation as a Count of Saint Germain, he founded Freemasonry, and so therefore he's known as the heart of all true Freemasons. Because of this alchemical seventh ray connection, he's known as the Lord of Magic, Sound and Light, King of the Aquarian Age, King of the Age of the Heart, Lord of the Freedom Flame. And the violet fire and the violet flame, this is the freedom flame, because when we use it for ourselves, we can cleanse karma and purify and move forward into freedom and liberation. Here's another image of the Lord Master Ra. You know these words, may my love rain down upon you. These are words that I've heard in my own heart that come, I believe, from his heart, because he is a Holy One and he works in the name of love. And, well, love, you know, work is love made visible. And I hear him say, work on, work on. He encourages us to be about the business of healing ourselves, healing our societies, our families, to work on. The connection into America and the 4th of July is very interesting. It is purported that he was there at the signing of the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July. I can't remember what year that was. Because, of course, he had the capacity to be in many places. Not only did he travel through Europe, but, yes, also connected either physically in America or in his etheric body. Yes, and I think it was Roosevelt at the time of the 1950s, you know, during or after the war, who spoke about America and the four freedoms, you know, the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. And you could say that by developing an up-close and personal relationship with the violet fire and the violet flame, and therefore the heart of the Lord Master Ra, we will be able to access these freedoms. So when we celebrate his work, when we celebrate his work on the 4th of July every year, it is a ceremony of transformation and healing. And so, of course, the violet fire angels can be called upon very strongly, but also the Liberty angels who work for Paul the Venetian, and also the Ascension angels who are connected intrinsically to the Lady Isis, who's known as the Lady of Sirius. Because the end result of our purification and our healing and our cleansing is that we lift into greater light and we follow the path of ascension. The Count of Saint Germain was involved in many societies, secret societies and emerging societies, and he was the founder of many of these societies, and he had many pupils and students deeply involved with esoteric rituals and ceremonies, this following the alchemical work of the Philosopher's Stone. Basically, the purpose for this was consciousness raising, to assist us to be the best that we can be. And, you know, during the French Revolution, he was very active at the time, and there was the cry of the ordinary people for liberty, and there was some imbalance going on between the upper class and the ordinary people. And the Lord Count of Saint Germain on a soul level, even though he moved on a physical level in the upper echelons of society, his work is always for democracy, for the good of the whole. There's consciousness raising, and it has been in Europe, and it has been in America, and is in Australia. So I'm going to talk about some of the work that he's done. He was there, now was it the 6th century, or 5th of the 6th century, they think, when King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table were there. And of course he was there at that time, and his incarnation was that of Merlin. Yeah? And so he was instrumental in this sort of working to bring unity and of course the Knights of the Round Table, they were off on a quest to seek the Holy Grail. Yeah, the Grail, which was the cup that Lord Jesus had drunk out of at the Last Supper. But of course, esoterically, the search for the Holy Grail is the search for compassion and love within. So he's deeply involved in that in the medieval times. And if you jump forward into the 20th century, he was instrumental and inspirational behind the fraternity of the Keepers of the Violet Flame, the Flame of Life. This is in America. And also he was the inspiration behind the I Am movement, which I think was the 1920s or the 1930s in America. Yeah, so he's never ceased to work with groups. As the regent of the seventh ray, the regent of the seventh ray is heralded in the book of Revelation and referred to as the seventh angel. And so, of course, he is the seventh angel. And, he may not be in a body anymore, but the holy ones in the angelic host have an ability to merge. And as we move into the age of Aquarius, the age of the heart, which is about 2,150 years, hopefully we will all be able to have cleansed and purified ourselves. We'll be able to have transformed society, transformed some of the karma, moved beyond some of the difficulties between men and women, some of the difficulties between the haves and the have-nots, some of the difficulties between those who have money and those who don't, towards greater freedom and fraternity and equality and justice. We can connect with the energy of the Lord Master R through the heart chakra, but equally we can connect with him through certain seats of power. It could be the governments, it could be a central court in a city. He's very easily accessed when we call him to us. Okay, let's talk about some of the incarnations that he had. So back in Atlantis, he was a priest of the sacred fire in the temple of Archangel Zadkiel, and that is what is present-day Cuba. Yeah. So of course, when Atlantis went down and went down over several stages, but before the Great Flood, it was the Lord Count of Saint Germain who transferred the flame, it's just the seed of the violet flame, into Europe, into the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania, and established the Temple of Purification there. Now, this was way back before Noah, before the flood. And so this interesting connection that he has with Transylvania, he brought the flame there into Europe, and then a couple of thousand years later, he took his final initiation there. Yeah, so he's been with us for a very, very long time. Okay, one of his incarnations, early incarnations in England, was he was a pagan who converted to Christianity and was subsequently persecuted and martyred. Yes, and very well known in the English historical traditions is Saint Alban. 70,000 years ago, this is a long time ago, after, well, I don't know, there's a highly advanced civilization in the Sahara. And so this is a very complicated history, because of course what we're talking about is the ancient Lemurian, the ancient Atlantean civilizations that have ended up here where we are in the Aryan civilization and where we were moving on. So we've been evolving as a species over tens of thousands of years. So he was a king emperor. And then if you jump forward to the Old Testament times, he was known as Samuel, the prophet of Israel, who was an advisor in the court of King Saul and King David. So as long as there's been humans on earth, the little Count of Saint Germain's been with us every step of the way in significant instrumental incarnations. He was Joseph. In biblical times, he was Joseph, the father of Lord Jesus and the husband of Lady Mary, and the protector of both of those. In the 5th century in Greece, he was the inspiration behind a Greek philosopher, Proclus, who was deeply involved in the succeeding Plato and the Platonic Academy. So deeply involved in mysticism and philosophy. This is what the Dark Ages. Here's another one of the Dark Ages incarnations I mentioned before. Most people, because of the popularisation of King Arthur and Merlin, would know something about that era and that time. So the Lord Master, his incarnation was Merlin as an alchemist, and he tutored King Arthur. And of course there he was at the order of the Knights of the Round Table and that search for the Grail. In the 13th century, he had an incarnation as Roger Bacon. Now, Roger Bacon was a Franciscan friar, deeply involved in philosophy and mysticism, but he was also a scientist, and his nom de plume as a scientist was Dr. Mirabilis. So here we are in the Dark Ages, and he's leading the way with science, yeah? And his scientific methods have developed whole treatises known as the Opus Maius and the Opus Minuus on the subjects of physics and chemistry and mathematics. This is light years ahead of the rest of us. So it's definitely been instrumental. In the 15th century, we know of this incarnation as Christopher Columbus, Christopher being the bearer of Christ, and the expansion out of Europe, what was the known world, into the American continents, North America, and of course there's been great decimation and great destruction of the indigenous people that's happened, both in North and South America. And yet I suppose if you can take a step back and look at it from a wide-angle lens, this is part of the unification of the planet as a whole, the expansion of consciousness, and this was the age of discovery. So there was an incarnation. I think he was Italian, sent on behalf of, was it the Spanish king and queen? And then if we move forward to the 16th century, we have Francis Bacon in England. And interesting incarnation because he did a great amount of things. He translated the King James Bible so that ordinary people could have access to it. He was the individual who actually wrote the plays of Shakespeare that gave humanity a code to live by. He founded the Masonic Order. Yes, so I thought it was... So it's Francis Bacon who founded the Masonic Order, and he sponsored the Rosicrucians. All of this happened, and yet he was unable to rise into the role that was his. He was the illegitimate son of the Queen Elizabeth and Lord Leicester. And for this reason, he was not acknowledged. And so... despite the fact that he had a great amount to offer and to give, he was held back by Queen Elizabeth and eventually disappeared. Very interesting times. And then he moved to Transylvania, the place where the Freedom Flame had been anchored, and became known as the Count of Rakosci. And it was in 1626 that he passed away. And it is rumoured that he attended his own funeral. And then in 1684, he took his final initiation. So you could say he moved into the realms of the immortals in 1684. So many, but that didn't stop there. Many incarnations. So it's reported. This is a whole subject in itself. It's reported that between the 17th and the 20th century that he had continuous incarnations, and he was, I think from his own admission, was it 325 years old or something like that. Voltaire spoke about him as the man who dies and yet knows everything. He was a linguist, he was a vegetarian, he played many instruments, primarily the fiddle. He was a beautiful artist, he was an alchemist, he was extremely wealthy, he was a scholar, he was a diplomat, moved in the high political circles. He had the secret of immortality, was deeply involved in health and healing. An enigmatic figure. The best video that I've seen on this is, it's called The Immortal Man, and it's on the YouTube channel of the Paranormal Scholar. And I encourage you to look at that because it's a wonderful, I think it goes for about a half an hour, wonderful video talking about the various sightings that he had during this incarnation over 350 odd years in Europe. And it was in the 20th century, in May 1954, that Saint Germain and Portia, Lady Portia, were crowned the King and Queen of the Age of the Heart. And so here we have the opportunity for all of us to follow in the footsteps of the Lord Master R, to bring the Christ consciousness into our hearts, to access our own God within, to call upon the divine and spiritual laws of freedom and justice. In the 19th century, when the Theosophical Society was co-founded by Madame Blavatsky, the Lord Master R was very active there, and Madame Blavatsky, there are photographs of her. There is a photograph of her with three of the Ascended Masters, and she spoke about how she'd met him and that how he was a member of the Universal White Brotherhood and an immortal. In the modern world, the Holy Ones reside in the inner etheric realms, in the inner retreats as we refer to them, and there are many retreats that the Lord Master R is involved in. He's still connected to the retreat above the Sahara. It's got a connection to the Royal Teton retreat in Wyoming here, where the Cave of Symbols is. It's got a connection into Cuba, which is where the previous Atlantean connection was. He's actively involved in the Trans-Himalayan retreats. His home retreat, if you want to call it that, well, his European home retreat is in Transylvania, but he's also got a connection into Lake Titicaca through South America. Everywhere and nowhere. So, how do we access some of the gifts and the teachings and the tools so that we can follow in his path? We have to learn about invocation and healing. We are moving through the great change. Everything is changing. We need access to the flame of transformation, the flame of transmutation, and maybe the flame of transfiguration. We can do no better than work with the teachings of the violet fire and the violet flame. And I simply refer you to the teachings of Lady Ananda Tarashan through her website, maitreyatheosophy.org. And out of these resources you will find texts to read, or you'll be referred to another website where you can buy meditations and decrees and the like. Fascinating subject, fascinating soul. I encourage you to get involved with the work of the Lord Master R. Thank you for your attention. This has been Chandra from Living in Light. Bye for now.